We are now leading the nation in farm to plate, farm to fork, farm to school, locally grown, organic food being packaged and sold not just in Vermont, but all across the country. Doesn't matter where I go. People say to me, you're from the state that makes great cheese. You're from the state that grows great syrup. You're from the state that makes great veggies. You're from the state that grows great things. Because of you.
The farmers are the rock stars, and without the farmers, we don't have anything. And I don't have words to express the gravity of that statement. Without them, we are nothing, and we have to support them. It's imperative.
Do you know where your food is coming from?
It's kind of goofy to say, but it's true, everyone eats.
We all need food to survive.
Food is just, it's like water, it's like air, it's food, it's a primal need. But also it furthers human connection. When you come together with friends, that's what you often do, is you sit and eat. It's a way that people kind of relate to each other.
At the basis of so many cultural identities is food. I had a farmer once tell me that being a farmer is being an applied practitioner of science, economics, and sort of where the two intersect. And he said, and it's not as if I'm just a biologist. I have to be a soil scientist, a biologist, a pathologist, and a meteorologist. So I have to know actually a lot about a lot of different aspects of science, and then figure out how to make that work under an economic construct and within ecological principles. I mean, it's really elegant if you think about it.
It just takes a lot to grow the food, to work the food, to weed it, plant it, harvest it, clean it. All of that stuff that we take for granted as really I think Americans take for granted overall. They walk into the store, they pick up a bag of chopped lettuce, they throw it in a bowl and they eat it. We've really kind of dumbed food down to a bowl of cereal. Americans, I think, spend less money on food than most other countries, and I think that by doing that, we've really diminished the value of that food. That's not to say that people have more money to spend. Folks are struggling, but we really need to recognize the value of our food and where it comes from so we can help support that food system.
I think farmers in general are they're very proud of what they do. I think it's a real honest form of work. We use expressions like you reap what you sow. That comes from agriculture. Farmers are people who can put in hard work and see the fruits of their labor quite literally in a growing season.
Part of the Vermont ethic and of the small sustainable farm ethic is steward to the land, steward to the community. So the farmers that I know feel a very strong obligation that they leave the land in a better condition than they started with it, right? And that they work with the properties of nature, not against the properties of nature. And they also feel a large obligation to the community, that I know that when I take this, whatever it is that came off my farm, and I sell it to you, that I will feel good about that and know that I'm doing no harm to your family. And even more than that I'm actually doing something good for your family. And so it's not just about making money, but also that you have an obligation to the environment, to the planet, and to your community and the people that you sell to. And I think that's an ethos that is very much central in Vermont farming.
As our country grew, new ways were found for the cities to serve the farms and for the farms to serve the cities. Today, ships from faraway places bring tropical fruits and flavorings that don't grow in the United States, like vanilla, cocoa, pineapples, coconuts, and bananas.
The average American today eats a meal that comes from about 1,500 miles away. That creates a whole different set of risks, costs, and exchanges that you have to make in order to achieve a system of that scale. How many people actually think about what they're eating much longer than the 5 minutes it takes them to open a can of beans or open a package of Fritos, right? And if that's our relationship with our food, then we're not thinking about the people who actually need to be nourished by the food, nor the people who are actually producing the food. Which means in that case, the kind of system we have now is devoid of human values, other than the value to sustain our own let's say, entertainment. In a local system, it's an exactly opposite set of priorities. You hopefully know the farmer. You can go to the farmer's market. You can go to the cooperative or the market where they're featuring the products of a local community and the farms that grow them. You can learn very easily about the growing processes and the challenges the farmers face.
The closer to home you can get your food, the more directly sourced you can get your food, the better. And we have a great group of local growers in Vermont. They're really outstanding. I would say some of the best in the world.
For us, we get a lot of energy out of the energy that our customers give to us, and their appreciation for what we're producing. It's been a really hot week. They go, wow, I don't know how you were outside all week long when it's 92, 93. You must be exhausted. And usually I am at that point, and they can see it. But just knowing that they're thinking about us, you know, when you have a direct consumer-farmer relationship, I think people think a lot more about what it takes to produce that food. And wow, my friends are outside in this heat or this cold or this rain or these storms, or, you know, last June it rained almost every day. And so, how do you do it? Being able to explain that to people gives them much more an appreciation for why food costs what it does, and gives us a lot of feedback and positive reinforcement.
We're not talking about giant agribusiness. These are true family farms. So the farmers really invested in the quality of their work, and they're in more control of the systems that they're dealing with. It's not a large corporate monoculture. These are mostly small, diversified farms with not a ton of people working on them. So again, the connection to the work is very direct, which makes us feel confident in doing what we're able to do, because then our connection to what we're offering is more direct as well.
The other thing is, instead of investing in communities that are thousands of miles away, you're investing in your own community. So the dollars that you spend on the food that you eat go to the farmers who are in Vermont, your relatively proximate neighbors. And so that comes back, it rebounds back to your benefit as well, as it builds an agricultural economy in an agricultural state that is a successful economy.
Knowing where your food comes from is a way to kind of apply a personal filter to your food choices. You can get food fresher, make healthier choices depending, you know, if you know the farmer, you can get involved in finding out growing practices. Also, it builds community, it keeps the money close to home, so it economically builds the community as well. And agriculture is really a foundation of, the same way that produce is kind of like a foundation of like natural foods and whole foods within a grocery store. Agriculture is a foundation to, it's like the most basic economy, and the way in which we take care of that it says a lot about the direction we move in, and about how effective we are in making those connections between people and the land.
I think that it's really important that the local food system starts growing and try and eat things that I know where they were grown, know the people who grew them. So I think you can definitely affect change by like doing small things yourself, like buying local food or starting a farm or growing food. I'm Henry Kmack. I work at Shelburne Farms, and I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Originally from there, the suburbs of Baltimore, Maryland. My mom's a lawyer, my dad's a businessman. They don't really understand why I wanted to be a farmer, but I decided way back in high school when I was like 16 years old that this is what I wanted to do, and then I just started working on farms in Vermont when I came to school at UVM, and in upstate New York at the end of high school, so yeah. I've always liked animals, working with animals and being outside. I decided the best way to work with like healthy animals and get to enjoy spending time with them and kind of be outside and not work for the man was to start farming. I'm in college, I live in a house with 4 other dudes, and there's always someone there. And here it's like, I am just put down in that pit with the cows and left there for a half an hour. That's my time to kind of hang bang out, like clear any thoughts I'm having, like mull through anything I've been thinking about. And it's just nice, quiet time. It's nice not to be like having to communicate with people. I just get to chill out, think about the cows. So I get here at like 2:30, feed the calves, rake beds, push up feed to the sheep, and then start milking. Working with the animals definitely teaches you patience, absolutely, because they can be really stubborn sometimes, especially brown Swiss. And also definitely gives you a good appreciation for where your food's coming from. Working the land definitely gives you more appreciation for like how fickle Mother Nature is. I mean, it's a hard job and like long hours, really weird hours, being up at like 4 in the morning when no one else is awake, but it's kind of interesting. And you get to watch the sunrise, which is sweet. Not many people get to watch the sunrise like a couple days a week, so yeah, it's just nice to be like using your body as part of your work, like getting up and exercising and walking around. Like you watch me work just now, I don't stop moving the entire time. Like I don't sit down, I'm not sitting at the desk on the computer. So I definitely enjoy that. A long time ago, I kind of like decided that I would rather just lead by example. Like I would rather start a farm that grows local food and provides food for my community. I don't want to go to Washington and be like, label GMOs, do this, do that. Like, that's not what I like doing. And I have high hopes for it. I hope it changes. But we have to show that it works first, because people are always going to return to that, like, how do we feed 9 billion people? Like, without the use of chemical fertilizers, GMO crops, all those things. And most people don't believe that there is a way to do it. I think that there is a way to do it, and I think that we could much more effectively use the land we have in this country. We're like one of the great agricultural powers in the world. Like, this country was founded on agriculture. And I think we really need to step back and take a look at it and be like, are we setting ourselves up for success in the future? And I don't think we are right now, the way we're doing things, but I hope that we change it fast enough. I don't have a ton of faith, but it's our job to fix it. I mean, that's just like how it works. Like, we now have to take responsibility for what they did and their parents did, and they totally messed everything up. I think the food system in this country is going to collapse.
The level of energy that goes into moving food around, it's not sustainable.
We've become accustomed to every ingredient all year round at your fingertips and at a really affordable price. We live in a place where naturally that doesn't happen.
And I hope that people in our generation are like starting to realize that. I mean, the average age of farmers is like 60 something now in this country. If no one takes it over, like, we're not going to grow any of our own food. And I think that's how civilizations fall.
I struggle with people who want like strawberries in January and are upset that they're $8 for a box. But, you know, those strawberries are coming from halfway around the world, and the cost that goes into getting them here is gigantic.
If you were to look at the amount of energy that we spend per year in the US on farming, it's enormous. If you look at the price of energy, you look at the price of food, the curves go like this. And they're lockstep and barrel, and that's because if you look at the energy we put in, it's a huge amount of the cost of farming production. The way we currently grow our food is that we boost plant caloric output, essentially through oil. So if you want a plant to have more calories, or if you want more calories out of an acre of land, you have to put energy in. And the way we put energy into plants is through nitrogen fertilizer, phosphorus, irrigation, farming, or tractors, and with the lion's share of that actually coming from nitrogen. So we spend enough energy and oil to feed 770 billion people. Right? We only have 320 million in the US, right? So we're clearly way beyond efficiency in the wrong direction. We're putting in more energy, enough energy to feed 770 billion, but the amount of food that we're getting out is only to feed 320 million. Right? And plus we export some. But even if you count, let's say we fed the entire planet, we'd still be putting too much energy in for what we get out. So if we hit peak oil and the oil starts to decline, that number is going to push up the price of food and ultimately decrease food production.
I imagine, the next, who knows, 20, 25, 50 years that our food system is going to be a lot more localized by necessity. Right now we can get away with it, but people are going to need to have local food producers. There's going to need to be the community farm.
And I don't think it makes sense to grow corn. Like, the whole middle part of our country is devoted to growing something that humans can't even eat. It's totally nuts. But I think that I hope that young people like myself are kind of seeing that while you're not going to get rich farming, it can provide kind of a rewarding livelihood, and it's important. It's really important. Vermont is like a hot spot for young farmers. I just wish that it was happening more in the Midwest, where we really need it. It's like, at least we've always had small farms in Vermont, and kind of have always been ahead of the curve when it comes to agriculture, but other parts of the country definitely need to have some more young people step in.
I think a lot of people are wanting an alternative lifestyle to working indoors. I think a lot of people are coming to this program, coming to farming because they want a career that they can, work on the land and produce something. Working in the food system, working in production, producing food, being a chef or a culinary expert or a food fermenter or a farmer. I mean, all those cheesemaker, all of those professions, they're kind of cool right now. I think that working in food is very trendy, and I don't think it's passing. I don't think it's, to say that, I don't mean that it's a superficial thing. I think that people are really thirsting for meaningful work, and I think that there's nothing more meaningful than producing the food that we are eating. And I wanted to become a farmer, 15 years ago. And now I think you can tell your parents. I would imagine a lot of people, young people, can say, hey, I want to be a farmer, and there's actually context for it. I think 15 years ago in LA, I wanted to be a farmer, and I think they had no idea what I was talking about. Like, because I think the stereotypes have shifted. I don't think that, necessarily a farmer means that you are chewing on straw and you're wearing, overalls and you're, a 60-year-old white man. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. I think that, those farmers do exist, but I think that there's a younger generation of farmers that are kind of shaking up the stereotype. So now I think some of our students probably aren't facing the same sort of, strange looks that I got 15 years ago. I think that it's a movement. It's a viable career option now. At least here in Vermont, I think, and I think it growing in other places in the country, it is becoming that. Every year, the students are inspiring to me because they come in just so in love with farming, and what I offer to them is more of the practical skills and the reason behind why we do what we do. I grew up in suburban Los Angeles, like by the ocean. There's no farms. I think because I grew up, basically in suburbia, I knew I wanted to get out of suburbia. So I think because I grew up in a totally different environment than a farm, I felt like very, very attracted to it as a reaction to what I didn't want, which was to live in Los Angeles. Real satisfaction from the work I'm doing has become why I'm doing it. But initially I just wanted to breathe fresh air, and I didn't want to be sitting in a chair in front of a computer.
Having a world that exists outside of a computer screen in terms of your work is good. Having work that is place-based, that is thing-based. There's kind of this narrative that our culture is too materialistic, but on a certain level we're not materialistic enough, because we think almost everything can be replaced by the knowledge economy. But this huge part of the world still exists in removing this rock from the ground, transporting it here, planting this seed here, harvesting the product, moving it there, building houses, building roads. There's so much that is still physical, and a lot of people have no real experience with the world of goods from the production end, only from the consumer end.
I think we've got some of our priorities screwed on wrong by the electronic immediacy world. It's an interesting scenario we're in. On the one hand, these screens give us access to information at our fingertips like never before. And at the same time, we obviously, I think as a society, get a little bit overly electronic, gadgety. You know, you can look at a screen all day long, it's never gonna feed you. Go shovel out a pig stall and think about where your meat comes from. Or go weed 300 bed feet of carrots and be crawling on the ground to do it so that you can get full-size carrots in your diet. Those things give you a different appreciation for what's important.
I mean, I see just people, even my parents' generation, how they're just staring at their phones all the time. Not just the youth who are suffering from an adaptation to this new technology.
When you're on the farm, you're moving your body, you're using, your brain, often you're farming with people, because sometimes it takes a crew to get the work done. So I think that farming is, I think it is a response to the other way of living, which is often solitary, often stagnant, often kind of repetitive.
The things that I can do on Facebook, the ways that I can connect to other people who want to share in what we're doing here, that's very, very exciting. I think, it's challenging for a lot of farmers, I think, because we'd all rather be in the field than working on the computer. That's why we're in farming. But you're able to expose what you're doing to people in a way that wasn't possible, not that long ago.
You're not a complete human being if that's all you do, right? Is that something in your inner self is missing. And so I think that's what's driving a lot of interest in agriculture and animals and plants and the environment in general, is that there's some tactile thing missing in your life. And so agriculture provides that in spades. One of the things that agriculture is doing is providing that connection. So I think there's a big draw from current society to try and reconnect, and I think it'll only benefit everybody.
But the part about my life when I lived in California that drove me the craziest was that I lived 20 miles from downtown LA, where I went to school, and I commuted to work. So 20 miles, not that bad, but it took me like an hour and a half to get there because the traffic was so bad. So I'm driving an hour and a half to spend 8 hours in an office, and then I spend an hour and a half in my car, and I get home exhausted, and I don't even know what happened in the world. You just feel disconnected to what's going on. My name is Drew Slaybaugh. We are in Charlotte, Vermont, on Shaky Ground Farm. To me, life is an organic thing, and it goes on outside of you no matter what you're doing. At least for me, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people who feel this way, being able to participate in life in its bigger form is very meaningful for me. And I don't think that you can participate in that bigger form of life when you're isolated. And I don't mean isolated on your own, because you can definitely participate in life when you're by yourself. But you can't participate in that when you're by yourself in a room with a computer. Out in the woods by yourself, even this time of year when you think life is dead, there's so much going on. I mean, like when the snow starts to melt, you can see little tracks, not footprints, but like little tunnels in the snow from where the voles and critters have been making homes that you don't even realize are there. The subtle things like the wind blowing in the trees and the birds and all these other things, they go on no matter what you're doing. And that to me is like the bigger form of life. My wife and I are both 28, and we just had our first child, Arlo, born in October, so he's 3.5 months old. I would say for me, my first exposure to a small farm was we went on a hike after we graduated from college. We hiked up the west coast from Los Angeles to Oregon. We were carrying like trail mix and peanut butter, and so we'd stop into a farm stand and get a big thing of strawberries and a giant heirloom tomato, And that was the first time I remember having like a really good tomato. So like I remember how meaningful it was for me to be able to shake the hand of the farmer who brought the food to me. That was so meaningful for me. And we've always said, you know, wouldn't it be fun to live on a farm or work on a farm someday? But I had no idea that you actually could. So then we would always start gardening on our own, and then it kind of just led into farming. We've always had an interest in food, so it kind of was a natural thing for us, I guess. I mean, I look back through my college years and even after that, and the times that I felt most gratified as a person was when I was kind of in tune with the daily and monthly and yearly cycles. We had an ideal in our mind, like, why can't we do that? If it's something that you think about and you want to try, you should definitely just try it. No matter if we're farming full-time or not, we'll never be able to not grow our own food to some extent. You know, once you do it, you can't go back, because it's so much more rewarding. The food tastes better, and the process is very fulfilling.
The more we learn about science and the world and our universe, the more some of our basic choices and our basic decisions are reinforced, like things that people have known for a long time. The energy you put towards anything, whether it be an organization, a movement, politics, cleaning up your yard, whatever that energy is, those are the results you're going to see. And with food, it's this most basic thing that we all share in common that we need to survive. So it becomes more important.
I think it creates civilized people. It creates civilization, you know. It
affects everything. So much of our world decisions are based politically and otherwise are based on resources and access to resources. This little boy came in, he was like 4 or 5 years old, and he looked at the strawberries, and he said to his mom, like he came in with his little brother and his mom, and he pointed to him and he said, "Isn't it a bit early for strawberries?" And I said, yes it is. That was really refreshing to see somebody so young understand this basic idea of seasonality and accessibility.
I think that even if we changed our food system and we saw more people buying local and more people buying organic and more people supporting GMO free, I don't think you would necessarily see price go down. What I do think is that an awareness of how price is generated will go up. So the more we can educate people on how food costs are created and set, I think people will start to understand, you know, this is what food costs. I also think that as people start to commit themselves to better food and better health, they'll see their healthcare costs go down, they'll spend less money on doctors, less money on medicine, and I think they'll see their costs even out. The best way to get people into it is to show them. We can't tell people what to do. No one wants to be told what to do, but we can show people a new way and we can give them options. We can say, try this recipe. And when they taste it and they like it, they'll say, what's in that? And you'll tell them what's in it. All of those little steps of showing people kind of move them in the right direction to making a really positive change in their health. It's a very slow process, but when they taste that one thing that changes their mind, it's a gradual process from there.
Yeah, I mean, education is a large part of all of this, right? So there are things that we've learned as a society that happens every generationally where we don't do it anymore, right? So when I was growing up, you know, pollution was rampant, and and especially in waterways, we came up with the Clean Water Act. We used to put lead into our gas so it would burn more efficiently. Now we don't do that anymore, right? So there are mistakes that we made as a society. Maybe they were predictable, maybe they weren't, but we made them and we fixed them. And I like to believe, I really want to believe that some of the larger problems we're going to address before they become really big problems. And so agriculture in the U.S., I would put, it's right at that precipice. If it's not already a big problem, we need to address it. And there are choices that we can make as consumers That's the first line, you know, and I guess that's really what it comes down to. During the 20th century, it seems like we took the American kitchen table and we pushed it to the backside. We looked at it as something as production. When you eat, you're just getting calories. And now what we've done in Vermont, we've moved it culturally back to the centerpiece. No, actually, this is how we define ourselves, is by the people that grew this, our relationship with those people, the relationship with the land, and then the relationship between the community and the food I can make.
I feel lucky that we live somewhere where you do have the opportunity to know where your food comes from, to know who grows it, to know how it's grown, to be able to pop by the farm and see that the pigs are happy rolling around in the mud and not in some huge, you know, warehouse all boxed up. But food is what one of the things that Vermont does well.
The table is where so much of culture begins. And we lost that back in the U.S., back when we homogenized all of our production. So when we made all tomatoes the same, instead of acknowledging that, guess what? Tennessee tomatoes and Creole tomatoes are better than Vermont tomatoes, you know, and that's okay, right? And Michigan carrots are really tasty, and asparagus or maple syrup from Vermont, as opposed to, say, Quebec. So this idea of actually acknowledging that, yes, there's terroir and that culture matters. And Vermont is taking that back in a sense. I'm a plant biologist. I like being in touch with the soil. It brings me joy and inner peace, if you will. I just find innate beauty in it. You know, I mean, so here you have a seed. At some point it becomes a seedling, then it takes light energy and it makes it into organic molecules. I mean, just think about that for a second. I take light energy, I make it into organic molecules. And those organic molecules are the basis of the food chain for just about everything on this planet. I mean, remarkable if you think about it. And so when I'm out in my garden and I'm, putting in my little spinach seedlings, that's literally what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the photosynthetic machinery and the powerhouse that has evolved that's going to take that into something that I could share with my children and my neighbors, my friends, and make it a cultural centerpiece of my house. And so my wife and I went one step further. We started, when we got married, a dinner party. And we have it every 15th of the month, and we've done this for 18 years in a row. And every 15th of the month we cook local food that either we've grown or we've gotten from some of our neighbors, and we have our 25 to 40 people over, and we serve a local vor homemade meal.
Here's what we got going on. I can ring the bell.
And so what we have is 2 pounds of maple wind bacon that was chopped up and then tossed with 4 pounds of onions, sauteed, and then 8 pounds of maple wind beef that was then quickly fried in that, and then cut with beef broth and a 6-pack of Shed Mountain Ale, touched off with a touch of balsamic vinegar, and then topped off with puff pastry. Then we have my personal favorite, roasted beets from Lewis Creek with bechamel sauce, and then Pete's greens.
Nice.
Get it in you.
Oh, yeah.
Did I enjoy eating sweet potatoes as a kid? Honestly, probably not that much. I was, you know, kind of a French fry and cheeseburger kid, like a lot of, and cake, like a lot of kids.
You know, I've gone through periods in my life when I've eaten everything, and I've been through periods in my life when I was not. When I was a picky eater, we'll call it what it is. And so I guess the answer is no. I didn't always like everything.
Actually, yeah, I really did. I mean, Mom made us, so we did. And I try and make my students, I make them eat their vegetables.
It was definitely pounded into me by my parents to eat a healthy diversity of food. Although, even there, I look back at what we ate, and a lot of our stuff was frozen veggies from a bag that then got boiled and then eaten.
I remember liking some vegetables growing up, and I was definitely a picky kid, but I grew out of it. Now I like just about everything.
I remember having really strong opinions about vegetables. They changed. So I'd be really into broccoli, and then the next year I would hate broccoli. So it was kind of like that. It was kind of finicky.
So I didn't avoid any food when I was growing up. You know, for the most part, I ate a lot of fruits and vegetables. But as I learned more about where they came from and how to cook them and how to prepare them and how to store them, you know, kind of changed things a little bit. But I've been a good eater all that I can remember.
I definitely didn't like peas and broccoli and cauliflower and all those unglamorous ones. No way. But I mean, we were eating canned peas and frozen peas, and like they were so unappetizing. And I remember when I started eating fresh peas and fresh broccoli, it was like totally different. It's like a different vegetable.